Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
No, thank you, Chair. Now, Advocate Mutebi here. Okay, now NDPP. It is now, the explanation you are giving is not acceptable because it's misleading. In a sense that if you account for 84 dockets, you can then go and account for individuals. Account for the same dockets. If out of the 84, 60 dockets were nolly prosecuted, say 60 dockets were nolly prosecuted, then you can add a column where you apply a method of numbers. Now, each docket carried 10 suspects or whatsoever, but we can't have such a situation where we are accounting for something that, and this side is less, that side is more. Now we don't know how many dockets that went to court and they were not prosecuted, and that's the measure, that's a barometer for us to measure that we are moving forward or we are moving backwards. Numbers of people don't necessarily give us any direction in this matter. Thank you. Chair, that is not my 10 minutes. It was on the clarities that were delayed.
Okay, you can start now.
All right. No, thank you again. Now, I'm going to go back to the entire team on the process flow of the investigation, especially where it concerns this huge number of null prosecutors, which Chairperson Area On characterized it as a method of checking if the docket is certified to go through or not. I think we need to get a clear explanation, because when she presented, she says, the Act says refer. And yes, rightfully so, you are doing what the Act says. But is it sufficient, that which is embedded in the Act, to arrive at successful prosecution? If it's not sufficient, then what is a shortfall thereof? Is it the matter of us correcting the Act, or is just a matter of supervision, or rather that which you were advising earlier on of allocating prosecutors? Because we can then engage on a malicious compliance, let's comply, but at the end of the day, the end product leads us to a null prosecutor. It's a very serious thing. Why am I saying that? I'm going to illustrate here, Chair. We had cases that actually triggered the meeting of today. We've been meeting municipalities, and we found that there's a lot of cases that SIU is engaged in. However, we're never finding the outcomes of these cases, dating as back as 2017. Now we have Mangaung cases, Ditsobotla and Matlosana. But here on your presentation, let's go to between slide 31 and 39. In particular, slide 31. Slide 31, if you look at it, Chair, you're going to see null prosecutors acquitted, provisionally withdrawn. These are all not leading to anything fruitful for us. What does that translate to? It translates to what she mentioned earlier on, that we're focusing on local government, yet national is where the road is. No, not necessarily. If you look at 31, was talking to municipalities except for Department of Education and Social Development. And these municipalities, they just do not provide any service, but money is paid to people that never provided any service. Then when we refer them to a criminal process does not bear any successful prospects for it to be successfully prosecuted. Then it becomes a problem. We need to identify what is happening. We can't have 14 dockets, Buffalo City Municipality, all of them null prosecuted. What's wrong? These are the people that we are seized with. I think tomorrow, Chair, we are adopting a report on Buffalo City. We are going to debate Buffalo City, yet the mayor of Buffalo City and everyone else is going to say, but the law doesn't find us guilty. What are these ones talking about? Then where is the problem? The problem is at the conceptual stage. The Act can't say refer something that which will not successfully get prosecuted. What then becomes another method? We ought to find a system or a method that corrects the Act so that it is accommodating both what is required in law and what the SIU refers. It must not just refer something that is not going to get us anywhere. Similarly to Umbashe, 25 referrals, 4 dockets, all of them gone. Those people of Umbashe are looking at us like, they're mad, these ones of parliament. They keep calling us, but the court says, there's nothing wrong. But there is something wrong. But there is a shortfall in investigation, acquiring evidence, and every other aspect of the law. Now, that's what we need to identify and make sure that it is corrected. And what is it that we must correct there? The first thing I've observed in your explanation was that the Act is actually wrong. Because the Act can't just say refer at a certain stage. Yet, there are other areas or concerns that must still be addressed in order for you to refer a docket which qualifies for a full prosecution. Now, here's my second question. There is the issue of the Asbestos case. It was in 2020 in terms of the presentation. I just didn't note the page. Then at 300 million. Then the preservation order was obtained 2025. However, the forfeiture took place 2026. A year later, it was March 2025, then March 2026, the forfeiture took place. What was the delay? Why are we delaying to get to a point where we do these things? But again, a huge question is between 2020 and 2025, what was the delay for this asbestos forfeiture preservation being obtained? Again, it goes to the Vincent case. Vincent was, I think, sentenced very long, but the issue of the forfeiture is still saying to be done. I'm not understanding. The Denel, again, is the same thing. The Denel at page 52, you're saying there's a potential for recovery. This Denel case, Mr. Mutibi, I've seen it from the 5th Parliament, but we are still saying there is potential to recover. Yet this case of Denel has been finalized at some. So there are things that are just not making sense as to what are the delays in between for us to close. But the biggest question I have is on page 50, where there's some sort of bargaining, NPA, for the SAP case, where SAP has paid, in fact, a certain fine. And this goes also for, before your time, ABB paid a fine, some auditing firm also at Eskom paid a fine. But it's not applicable for a service provider who has gotten involved into malfeasance and all of these things. They go to jail. But these ones, for some reasons, we have a way of getting billions out of them, and they still continue being in the system. SAP still operates in our government systems. ABB still operates in Eskom. I just forgot the name of that auditing firm. That auditing firm is still practicing in Eskom. So it's just backwardness, something, I'm not sure what are we doing. They pay a fine and then they continue to practice. In a way, you are saying, you've done something wrong, but it's not serious. However, We're talking about billions that they've gotten involved in. And then you're going to find a service provider for whatever, maybe at Eskom in something, for 10 million, wrong pricing, inflation of pricing and all of that. They don't have the option of sitting and bargain with NPA and pay a fine and then go back. SIU is the first one to send them to Treasury for blacklisting. Secondly, they don't accept the fine, they send them to jail. Then they go for asset forfeiture and go take their things. Can you see? You have two methods of dealing, of sanctioning people, and they are not fair. Why are these big white monopoly capitals getting a fine option and they are not removed from our system of government because they continue? Johannesburg, Tshwane, we met those people. There is a huge transgression related to SIU. Then when it gets to NPA, they bargain and then they pay a fine. We're talking billions. But a service provider, black in the main, goes to jail, asset forfeiture, blacklisting a treasurer. There's nothing wrong with that system. It's right because so that they learn not to steal. But why do we have an option, comfortable for these other people, NPA? It's not acceptable. We can't have them like that because they continue to do what they are doing. The last one for now, Chair. When there was a presentation, one of the reasons of null prosecute was sort of example made that 5 years later, let's take COVID, for instance. 5 years later, you go back, you want invoices of these people and all of those things for SIU to make a case and all of that. Those things are not there for obvious reason. One, it's old. Secondly, you can't really tell what left the bank of this service provider with what was received by the state institution. If, let's say, a clinic during COVID was given masks by a service provider, and today we want to check the value of the mask versus what the service provider was doing, we can't get that information today. But you still take that docket and say it must go. You can see there's money that left the service provider account. The masks were provided to the clinic, but there's inflation involved. Then when it gets to court, they say, but there is not enough evidence to back up your case. I want to check now here, at what point do we take a case to court versus the amount which is going to cost the state to investigate, whereas we know it's not going to yield any fruitful result? And what do we advise in that case? Because this is also as a result of late signing by the president on all the requests for SIU to start proclamations. How do we deal with that area? That will be for now, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Can we get answers to those questions? Thank you.
Honorable Chair, I'll start off and my colleagues can augment. We have taken the comment around accounting sort of like for like. If we speak dockets, then we must account for what became of the dockets, or at least have some slide that indicates the dockets, and then indicate that in one docket there were so many individuals or entities. We need to give a clear explanation for that. On the issue around the referral, yes, the Act says refer, and I'm sure SIU can speak to that, but I have the advantage of both worlds. The SIU Act specifically indicates that where the investigation points to criminal action, as I said, my colleagues can come in, then that at that point, a referral should be made to the relevant prosecuting authority. I suppose at some point we sort of discussed in terms of what does the Act mean by saying refer to the relevant prosecuting authority. Then we realized, I mean, there's a single prosecuting authority, but of course you've got divisions, you know, and that could have been the rationale. But at that stage of the referral, Honorable Mente and the Honorable Chair and Honorable members, at that stage of the referral, SIU may be of the view, and again, we would say they are trained in determining whether this evidence points to criminal action. But when it reaches on the NPA side, and that's the point we have made in the document we submitted, and this, I think the committee has really had it ad nauseum every time, that when it reaches NPA and NPA goes through, that evidence presented would not necessarily meet the standard that is required of a decision to be made whether to prosecute or not. And that is why there's a referral to DPCI or to SAPS, so that they can investigate or do further investigation required, and then put it in a docket form. And when you put it in a docket form, you would have the A1, A2, and the affidavits that are taken for purposes of a criminal case, are then completed in the form that sits in the docket. Only then will the prosecution be able to take it and assess it, go through it, and make a decision whether to prosecute or not to prosecute. That points to systemic issue. It's a systemic issue. And when I sat down with my colleagues at NPA, I got to understand that it's actually historic. When we used to have Scorpion, that the matters would be referred, and Scorpion would, when evidence didn't meet the criminal standard, Scorpion would investigate within NPA. But when the Scorpion was disestablished, that part of the law did not change. And hence, there were no investigative powers in NPA, then hence the referral to DPCI. So this was really a conundrum that was faced by the agencies, and I think continue to face it to date. Okay, up to now, we do have IDEC. IDEC has got criminal investigation powers, and that's why some of the matters, particularly the state capture matters, are investigated there and so on. But at the time of the referral, you would find that the evidence necessarily does not really enable the prosecutions to take a decision, and hence the referral to DPCI. Honorable Mente, you have made a pointer to a point that really is a concern, and we do take that. Honorable Chair, we will not really be able to indicate the timeline, but we do have a process in NPA which really looks at, cases that have been withdrawn, the rationales for withdrawals. We could probably do the same and really check, why this high number of nolle prosecutions, right? But it could. There's a slide that indicates the high-level reasons, But as I say, these are sort of high-level. We could really go back and require the colleagues to really go and check the rationale for this high number of knowledge. And if it goes back to the systemic problem that I've mentioned, then we need to say so. But if it gets knowledge after it has gone through the process of DPCI, then it raises even a further concern that we would have referred it to DPCI, it would have been investigated, and then it comes back and then we null prosecute. I'm sure there would be reasons for that. And I'm saying, as we sit here, we probably may not have the detailed rationale, which indicates that we may have some work to do for the committee so that we come back with a comprehensive view of all that, of all this high level knowledge, because it's really a concern. And Honorable Mender makes a point that it creates sort of a wrong impression where the people involved would say, you know, I've not been prosecuted and so on and so forth. Why is it that you're still looking at me, you know, as a, call it, problematic person when the process has not prosecuted me? So that's the comment that we can make. Yeah, the question is, what do we need to correct? Over and above the systemic correction, legislative versus legal, naked report, we could come back after really looking at what happened and then come back with more reasons on what needs to change. That's what we can offer. And then the Asbestos case, on the timeline for the case itself and the asset, I'm going to require my colleagues to come in, maybe just make a note. And then the Denel one, if you have an explanation there, I do agree that it comes a long way. Yeah, so there has been a delay there that needs to be explained. And again, the fines paid and the rationale behind the corporate settlements vis-a-vis the consistent application to all the entities, whether small or big, and the issue around the companies continuing to do business. Honorable Mentor referred to the blacklisting. Yeah, as we looked back on the blacklisting, I think it wasn't done consistently, and we've engaged at the time with National Treasury to ensure that it's really done consistently, and that's where we saw the likes of Bain and Company being blacklisted. We would have expected that the same would have gone to the others, you know. So there has been quite an inconsistency on that side. Yeah, perhaps at this stage I should pause and give my colleague the opportunity to respond.
Thanks, NDVP. Thanks, Chair and honorable members. I will start with the question around the asbestos matter and the delays around preservation and the forfeiture. Chair, these are the matters that I had indicated earlier on in terms of Chapter 6. That was purely a Chapter 6, which was supposed to have been a shorter and a quick recovery process. But in some of the Chapter 6 matters, we are fully litigated. So when you're supposed to go and get to court and obtain a forfeiture, or you file a forfeiture order or application, you get an opposition from the defendants. So this is what happens in some of the Chapter 6 matters. We get fully litigated, we'll litigate fully. The matter gets to be heard in court until the court delivers a judgment, which is either in our favor or not in our favor. And on this matter, eventually, a year after, it got to be in our favor. Let me talk to Vincent Smith. So let's get to Vincent Smith. Vincent Smith, we all know that he pleaded guilty. And Vincent Smith, we had a restraint on his matter. He offered, after conviction, Vincent Smith offered asset recovery 1.5 million. were refused, we launched a confiscation application for a full confiscation inquiry to be held. And that is a full process. We are in the process of litigating that confiscation application. We're filing our court papers tomorrow because we appreciate that his benefit was fairly more than the 1.5 billion that he was offering. So that is why that matter is still reflected as that, even though he was convicted some time ago. So we are fully litigating on that confiscation order because we can't agree on an amount and we are not prepared to accept an amount of 1.5 million. Wens, do you want to take on the issue of the corporate ADRs and complete the full? I think that should be all in terms of the asset recoveries after she takes the corporate ADR.
Okay, just in terms of corporate ADR, so we've got the strategies that Advocate Mdengwani's mentioned, Chapter 5, Chapter 6, but there is also the corporate ADR strategy. It basically came out of recommendations from the Zondo Commission that we should be looking at this as an option. Now, these matter, which is, and there are guidelines. Matters are carefully evaluated in terms of, is it appropriate to apply corporate ADR or not? Very often, particularly in corruption-related matters, you find that entities are used purely as vehicles to receive and launder proceeds. Those are not entities that would be appropriate for purposes of corporate ADR, because in its essence, those entities are not sound or viable. But you do have other entities where, and it may be some of your bigger corporates that employ a lot of people, where there are rogue employees who basically manipulate the internal processes within the entity in order to derive some gratifications for themselves. Now, those more particularly, where the individuals are identified and they are ring-fenced, it's not necessarily so that the company itself is, in its essence, problematic. There we may well consider it appropriate to apply corporate ADR. And in those instances, no doubt, the company then needs to look at its compliance very carefully in order to make sure that those irregularities and that opportunity for manipulation is not repeated. So as part of the corporate ADR strategy, it's for the company to review that and to be able to put in place, if it's not effectively in place, put in place compliance strategies that will make sure it doesn't happen again. Also, as part of that, it's not to say that the employees who have been identified get off scot-free. So the company gets to compensate, loosely expressed, for its non-compliance, but the individuals themselves who were complicit are investigated and ultimately will be charged and sufficient evidence found convicted. I'm not sure if that sufficiently answers the aspect of that strategy. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Chair.